Welcome to AMX Detectives. We unveil the world of mystery. Member of different detective associations in India and abroad. About AMX Detectives Private Limited. Headed by Mr. Baldev Kumar Puri. The chairperson of AMX Detectives, Mr. Baldev K.R. Puri, began his profession in the field of investigation from a very nascent stage and brought it to fruition with his handwork and dedication. With an experience of over 30 years, he's also a member of very esteemed detective associations in India and abroad. He's an executive director, Delhi chapter of Association of Private Detectives, APDI, and also a core group member of BNI, Commercial Enterprise Network Global, as well. Giving meticulous information within the ideal time frame and within the frame of confidentiality is what we count as our strength. The information is thoroughly validated owing to his helping group of young and skilled investigators on pan-India basis and overseas. We've got specifically designed services to meet precise necessities of every customer. Personal investigations. Matrimonial detectives. Divorce cases investigations. Loyalty test investigations. Extramarital affairs. Litigation support. Still photo and videography. Undercover operations. Surveillance detectives. Corporates investigations. Pre-employment verifications. Post-employment verifications. Asset verification. Missing persons investigations. Trademark and copyright verification. Employee theft. Business interference. Risk analysis. Due diligence investigation. Branches. Detective Agency in Delhi. Detective Agency in Mumbai. Detective Agency in Bangalore. Detective Agency in Hyderabad. Detective Agency in Ahmedabad. Detective Agency in Chennai. Detective Agency in Kolkata. Detective Agency in Surat. Detective Agency in Pune. Detective Agency in Jaipur. Detective Agency in Lucknow. Detective Agency in Kanpur. Detective Agency in Nagpur. Detective Agency in Indore. Detective Agency in Thane. Detective Agency in Bhopal. Detective Agency in Visakhapatnam. Detective Agency in Ghaziabad. Detective Agency in Ludhiana. Detective Agency in Agra. Detective Agency in Nashik. Detective Agency in Faridabad. Detective Agency in Meerut. Detective Agency in Rajkot. Detective Agency in Kalyan and Dombivli. Detective Agency in Vasai Virar. Detective Agency in Varanasi. Detective Agency in Srinagar. Detective Agency in Aurangabad. Detective Agency in Dhanbad. Detective Agency in Amritsar. Detective Agency in Navi Mumbai. Detective Agency in Allahabad. Detective Agency in Ranchi. Detective Agency in Gwalior. Detective Agency in Vijayawada. Detective Agency in Jodhpur. Detective Agency in Madurai. Detective Agency in Raipur. Detective Agency in Kota. Detective Agency in Guwahati. Detective Agency in Chandigarh. Detective Agency in Solapur. Detective Agency in Hubli and Darwin. Detective Agency in Bareilly. Detective Agency in Moradabad. Detective Agency in Mysore. Detective Agency in Gurgaon. Detective Agency in Aligarh. Detective Agency in Jalandhar. Detective Agency in Tiruchirappalli. Detective Agency in Thiruvananthapuram. Detective Agency in Bhiwandi. Detective Agency in Saharanpur. Detective Agency in Gorakhpur. Detective Agency in Guntur. Detective Agency in Bikaner. Detective Agency in Amravati. Detective Agency in Noida. Detective Agency in Jamshedpur. Detective Agency in Balinagar. Detective Agency in Warangal. Detective Agency in Cuttack. Detective Agency in Firozabad. Detective Agency in Kochi. Detective Agency in Balnagar. Detective Agency in Dehradun. Detective Agency in Durgapur. Detective Agency in Ajmer. Detective Agency in Gulbarga. Detective Agency in Jamnagar, Detective Agency in Ujjain, Detective Agency in Lani, Detective Agency in Siliguri, Detective Agency in Jhansi, Detective Agency in Ulhasnagar, Detective Agency in Nellore, Detective Agency in Jammu, Detective Agency in Sanglim Rajkapwad, Detective Agency in Belgaum, Detective Agency in Mangalore, Detective Agency in Ambattur, Detective Agency in Tirunelveli, Detective Agency in Mulgoan, Detective Agency in Gaya. Contact us. AMX Detectives Private Limited. Contact person, Mr. Baldev Kr. Puri. Address, 103, Ansel Majestic Tower, PVR Cinema Complex, UP. HDFC Bank Limited, Vikas Puri, New Delhi 110018, India. Telephone, +91, 11 65,679,392, 41,586,701, 26,714,263. Mobile, +91 9,891,758,759. Email, info@amxdetectives.com. Website, www